Hi Amy, I need some help completing this risk assessment form.
Well, to do a risk assessment we use the 5 steps by the HSE. Firstly, we identify the hazards. We would think about the work equipment and location involved in the task.
I see. What about substances, and do we just do a risk assessment on our own?
Yes, substances like paint should be considered. A risk assessment is better where different people involved in the task add their input.
That makes sense. So if I was working up a ladder, the hazard might be falling down the ladder.
Exactly. The next step is to think about who might be harmed. Some hazards might just affect the person working, while others like noise might hurt someone else in the area.
So if I was using carrying a box, the risk would be to me. But if I was using powered equipment, then the dust and noise could hurt anyone in the area.
Yes, you're doing great. So now we have thought about what could harm people and how they might be harmed. The next step is to evaluate the risks and put controls in place.
How does that work?
Well, to evaluate the risks we normally use a risk matrix. This involves thinking about how likely something is to happen and how bad it would be if it did happen. Using a 5x5 matrix, we would think of 5 being the worst case scenario and 1 being minor. So if I thought it was almost certain something would happen, I would put 5. And if I thought something would cause serious permanent injury, I put 5 for the severity. We then multiply the likelihood and the severity and we have our risk rating.
And I do that for each hazard. What about controls though, and what if some hazards have a risk rating of 6 and others have a risk rating of 20?
When putting controls in place, we start with the high risks. The higher the number, the more we need to prioritize it. Controls should be put in place using the hierarchy of control.
What's that?
The hierarchy of control is the preferred methods for reducing a risk. The first one is to eliminate the risk. This would mean not doing the task at all.
That makes sense, but what if I have to do the work and there's no way around it?
Then we would think about substitution. If we were using a substance or piece of equipment, then we could switch it for something less dangerous. After that, we think about engineering controls that can be put in place. This could mean alarms, ventilation, or things like soundproofing.
What else could I do?
Once you have tried all these, you start to think of administrative controls, like job rotation and planning, as in spending limited time on the task. Or safe systems of work and training. The least effective method is individual controls like PPE. Although we should use as many methods as possible to reduce the risk.
I see. So if I substituted a substance for something less hazardous, I would still need to think about training and PPE.
Exactly. Once this is done, the fourth step is to record the assessment. It's important to keep records and communicate the assessment with everyone involved. By recording the assessment, it is also easier to review the assessment, which is the last step.
When should I review it?
When something changes, or after 1 year, whichever is sooner. Changes could be a change to anything involved in the task, and then updated measures can be added on.
Thank you, that's been very helpful.